Welcome to Handmade History.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sonia.
And today we are talking about paper cutting around the world.
But first, we want to remind you that pre-orders are open for our first ever kit, a collaboration with M Creative J. Order your Wild Pansy Stump Work kit and get everything you need to learn the art of stump work and join us this spring for a super fun stitch-along. If you pre-order our kit before December 31st, you'll get 15% off. This discount applies to both the kit and the PDF pattern. The Wild Pansy Stump Work kit makes a great last-minute gift. If you order one for a friend, we'll send them an e-card to let them know that their kit is on its way. Just put a note in your order that this is a gift, and we will do the rest.
And now, on to the show. This topic is a suggestion from Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. And this is our first ever paper craft episode, which is hard to believe because I've done a lot of paper crafts. How about you, Sonia? Have you done any paper crafts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Paper cutting is a very old tradition that is done all over the world. We're going to cover a few old and interesting traditions in various countries, including China, Indonesia, Mexico, Germany, and the U.S., among others. Sonia, want to kick us off?
So what is paper cutting? Paper cutting is an art that is as old as the invention of paper. And paper, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, is a, quote, matted or felted sheet, usually made of cellulose fibers, formed in a wire screen from water suspension. We are going to use a slightly broader definition and include paper-adjacent materials such as papyrus and vellum. These materials are used in very similar ways when it comes to paper cutting. Paper cutting involves cutting a single piece of paper into a shape or image using scissors, a knife, or a mallet and chisel. Typically, the negative space of the image is removed, leaving behind a picture. This picture might be an abstract or geometrical design, a scene, an object from nature, a person or figure, or other objects and motifs. We'll talk more about the wide variety of paper cutting images later on. Sometimes, paper cuttings are done one at a time. Other times, multiple papers are cut at the same time. The paper might be folded to create a symmetrical design. One common paper cutting that children do in the U.S. is making snowflakes.
Sonia, when was the last time you made a snowflake?
I don't remember. A long, long time ago.
I've gotten to make some with my kids. So.
Yeah. Probably like in school I made them. Yeah.
We're going to give a brief overview of the invention of paper before we talk about paper cutting. And much of this comes from an article by Robert C. Williams of the Museum of Papermaking in Atlanta, Georgia. A number of materials which are not technically paper functioned in very similar ways as paper for thousands of years. The oldest material like this is tapa, which we actually mentioned in episode 18, Aloha shirts and Bermuda shorts. Tapa is made from scraping the inner bark of the mulberry tree into thin sheets. For example, a piece that starts out 2 inches wide is beaten to become 10 inches wide. Tapa is used for writing and also as fabric. And it is made around the world, including in Hawaii, which is why it came up in our episode on Aloha shirts. The oldest tapa that has been found dates to 4000 BCE. It was discovered in Southeast Asia. Other examples have been found in Peru, which date to 2100 BCE, and in China, which date to 600 BCE. Another very old paper-like substance is papyrus. Papyrus is made by slicing up strips of the papyrus plant and laying the strips next to each other. Then you lay another layer of strips on top of these, perpendicular to the first layer. These are pounded together to make a sheet of papyrus. And the oldest evidence of papyrus that has been found dates to 3000 BCE. People also used palm leaves as paper, especially in Southeast Asia. Evidence of this dates to the 400s BCE. Palm leaves were cut into long rectangles, and to write on them, you would use a sharp tool to scratch into the leaf. Then you rub soot into the marks to make them easier to see. And people made books by tying together sheets using metal prongs or wires, kind of like a palm leaf binder. And finally, one more paper-like material is parchment, which is made from animal skins. The skins are scraped, stretched, and rubbed with lime to make them usable. Parchment was invented in the 100s CE and is named after the Greek city of Pergamon.
It is generally agreed that paper was invented in China. A court official named Sai Lun recorded the process of papermaking in 105 CE. However, we know that paper was invented before then. A paper prayer was found in the bricks of a house that dates to 200 BCE. The process of papermaking involves soaking the material in water, pounding it into a pulp, pouring the pulp into a screen, and then letting it dry. The oldest paper was made from recycled fishing nets, bamboo, mulberry bark, and hemp. In China, the pulp was soaked in pits dug into the ground and laid in bamboo screens. These screens were simply set in the sun to dry. Over the centuries, the process of papermaking migrated across Asia, and various countries innovated and improved different parts of the process. In Korea, for example, in the 600s, people pounded the paper with the assistance of animals. They invented a screen that could be lifted off the frame, and they also dried paper on wooden boards. These innovations allowed people to make more paper more quickly. And fun fact, Koreans invented the envelope and toilet paper.
Buddhist monks from Korea brought the practice of papermaking to Japan in 610 CE. And this is not the first time that monks have spread craft technology. They also gave the secret of silk making to Justinian. I was thinking monks and nuns are good craft spreaders, just like queens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In Japan, people made very thin, almost silk-like paper. The practice of papermaking spread to Baghdad, Iraq, where the first water-powered paper mill was built in 794 CE. And then the Islamic Empire brought paper to Western Europe, specifically Spain. The Muslims built paper mills in Sativa. The first one was built in 1150. They also converted Roman olive grinding mills into paper mills.
Around the same time, a type of paper called a model was made in Mexico. A model comes from the indigenous language Nahuatl. It is made from the bark of the maguey, fig, and mulberry trees. It's made by scraping, washing, and boiling bark with ashes. Then the fibers are rinsed and beaten. The model is left to dry in the sun, and the fibers weave together naturally.
A machine for making wood pulp was invented in the 1840s in Germany, and wood pulp mills were built around Western Europe and in the U.S. soon after. At first, people were skeptical of wood pulp paper. Here's a story about a paper mill in New Hampshire from a book by Charles Thomas Davis, written in 1886, called The Manufacture of Paper, Description of the Various Processes for the Fabrication, Coloring, and Finishing of Every Kind of Paper. This story was told by Pearson C. Cheney, the governor of New Hampshire, and it's about a Mr. Russell who wanted to manufacture wood pulp paper. Quote, Mr. Russell completed his mills at Franklin, but after manufacturing the pulp, he could not find a paper manufacturer who would buy a pound of his wood pulp because they did not believe in it. They had no faith in it, and he was compelled to buy a paper mill in order to make a good test of it, which he did in Franklin, right beside his pulp mill, and made the test, and a successful test, and showed a very good paper. After the paper was made, he found great difficulty in selling it. The printers felt that they could not use it. They were afraid to use paper made from raw wood. They were afraid it would injure their type or ruin it, and they declined to use it. Eventually, Mr. Russell printed a standing monthly order from the Boston Herald on wood pulp paper without telling the Boston Herald what it was. And the next month, they printed it on the old, not wood pulp paper, and the Boston Herald complained. So that's how they started printing and getting their wood pulp paper out there.
Wow.
Just a fun little side story.
So what did they use before wood pulp paper?
Before wood pulp, paper was made from rags, especially linen rags, which were soaked in water and lime.
Now we will get into paper cutting. Just like in our lace episode, we're going to go around the world chronologically. This is by no means a comprehensive list. There are paper cutting traditions everywhere. We'll start with Chinese paper cutting. The oldest example of a paper cut is a symmetrical circle that was cut from paper found in Xinjiang, China. This circle dates to the 500s CE. Paper cutting was popular in China from the 600s through the 1200s CE. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Intangible Heritage in 2008. It is done in communities all around the country. Traditionally, paper cutting is done by women. Mothers often teach their daughters and granddaughters to do it, and it's a common craft in rural areas. Chinese paper cutting can be done with scissors or with a chisel. They are sometimes cut out of red paper or cut from plain paper and then colored in. Chinese paper cuts are very elaborate. Southern China is known for finer, more delicate motifs, while northern China is known for bolder, wilder images. They were once part of bridal dowries. Now they are created for festivals, marriages, and birthdays. They can also be made as prayers to do things like invoke rain or ward off the devil. They are also used to decorate windows, ceilings, walls, doors, and mirrors. In 2014, an amazing paper cutting artist named Gao Feglian came to the Smithsonian Museum's Folklife Festival.
Yes, she and her daughter and granddaughter were profiled in a great video I watched. Feglian said, quote, "I don't recall how small I was, but I knew I fell in love with paper cutting as soon as I grasped the scissors." And Feglian grew up in a rural area with no electricity or transit. When she didn't have paper to cut, she would cut leaves. Her daughter said that for Feglian, paper cutting was an emotional outlet. And Feglian taught her daughter, her granddaughter, and her niece to make paper cuts. Another very old tradition that also happens to be on the UNESCO World Heritage Intangible Heritage list is wayang kulit from Indonesia. This is the art of shadow puppets cut from paper or leather. These puppets are held against a screen to put on shows, and the practice of making them likely came to Indonesia from India with the spread of Hinduism. Similar puppets are made in South India, and these are called Thalumbo Malata. Moving on, now we'll talk about Mexico. One of the most well-known practices of paper cutting is done in Mexico. And I used several resources for this, but a very helpful one was the Art History virtual exhibit at Mizzou. This type of paper cutting is called papel picado in Spanish, and it means punched or perforated paper. You can probably picture the colorful banners of tissue paper strung across streets. This tradition started over 500 years ago. Indigenous Mexican people, including the Otomi and Aztec people, made a model paper, which we mentioned earlier. And they also made paper cuts from a model. Often the paper cuts were of gods and goddesses. One popular subject was Miquitzil, the Aztec god of death. Like Chinese paper cuts, these were used to ward off things like disease and dangerous spirits. They were also used in protection rituals. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico in the 1500s, they banned the making of a model, which they mispronounced a mate. They also confiscated and burned the model paper cuts. However, people in Otomi communities continued to make a model in places like Puebla and Veracruz. Fast forward 400 years, in the 1950s, indigenous people began to produce a model commercially and sell it in Mexico City. It was used by Nahuatl painters and even promoted by the Mexican government, and it is widely available today and used for ceremonial purposes.
Indigenous people also continue to make paper cuts. There are differing accounts about the origin of the use of thin tissue paper that we now associate with papel picado. One possible origin comes from the Spanish trade that went between China, the Philippines, and Acapulco, which is on the west coast of Mexico. The Spaniards imported porcelain to Mexico from China. It was wrapped in very thin paper, which was also stenciled with designs. These designs were used in Mexico for ceramics and embroidery, as well as wood carving. This paper was called papel de chin. Remnants of papel de chin have been found as far north as New Mexico. Indigenous people also used the papel de chin to make papel picado. Another origin story is that in the 1800s, indigenous people were forced to buy things that they needed from Spanish haciendas, which are large estates. This included papel de chin.
Regardless, it's clear that indigenous people never really stopped making papel picado. Papel picado also began to reflect el sincretismo, or the syncretic traditions of Mexico, which blend indigenous beliefs and practices with Christian figures. Local people cut images from the papel de chine that included Christian motifs. People hung papel picado on altars and across entryways and from ceilings. These paper cuts were especially used to celebrate Dia de los Muertos, which is also called Dia de Difuntos, and they are still used for the same purpose today. These paper cuts are typically funny, not morbid or sad. The images celebrate the afterlife. It reflects the indigenous view of death as part of a cycle and something to be embraced as a part of life. So, for example, paper cuts might include images of skeletons doing everyday activities. And one very famous image of a skeleton is La Catrina. She is a skeleton wearing a fancy hat, European clothing, and makeup. She was created by a lithograph artist named Jose Posada in the early 1900s, and it was the subject of a political cartoon. La Catrina is meant to be a native or mestiza or mixed person who, quote, puts on airs and denies her native heritage even in death. The makeup that she is wearing is supposed to lighten her face. Papel picado is also made for other holidays, including Christmas and Independence Day, and other common motifs include suns, birds, and flowers. And it is often used outside, where it disintegrates in just 1 month. To make papel picado, very thin tissue paper is stacked onto a thick piece of lead. Up to 50 sheets can be cut at one time. A design, which is called a patron or pattern, is drawn on thick paper. Then, the artist uses a mallet to pound different-sized chisels through the paper. These chisels are called fierritas, or little irons, and it can take 30 hours to design and cut papel picado. The main centers of papel picado are San Salvador, Huixcolotla, and Puebla, and there are two main rival tallares, or family workshops, the Vivancos and the Rojas.
So moving on, now we're going to talk about Jewish paper cuts. Paper cutting has been a part of the Jewish tradition in different parts of the world for a very long time. It is often used to decorate important religious documents, such as ketubot, which are marriage contracts. It might also be used to decorate the margins of special scrolls made of passages from the Torah, or the Hebrew Bible. This part of the Jewish tradition called Hiddur Mitzvah, which means the beautification of the commandments and rituals of Judaism. There are also special paper cut prayers called Mizrach or Shavizi, which are attached to a wall in the direction of Jerusalem. Other paper cuts are used as amulets to protect women and newborn children. These are called kimput briv, and you put these on all four walls of a room where the baby and mother are. Others are used to ward off the evil eye, which is a tradition in many cultures. And there are paper cuts to celebrate Jewish holidays such as Purim and Sukkot. There are also paper cut calendars that count the days between the two holidays, Passover and Shavuot, and calendars that show the deaths of family members. Paper cuts have been made with both parchment and paper.
The oldest reference to Jewish paper cutting comes from 1345. Rabbi Shem Tov ben Yitzhak ben Ardutiel wrote The War of the Pen Against the Scissors. In this story, his ink froze and he resorted to cutting up letters, as was fashionable in Spain. References to Jewish paper cutting also pop up in Dutch and German writings throughout the 1600s and 1700s. And there's an Italian ketubot from the 1700s or 1800s decorated with paper cutting. As we mentioned, Jewish paper cutting was done all over the world, but the tradition was particularly strong in Eastern and Central Europe, Russia and Ukraine, and as far east as Turkey, North Africa, Syria, and Palestine. It peaked in the 1800s when affordable wood pulp paper became more widely available, but they are still made today by artists and craftspeople. Jewish paper cuts are associated with men, especially students and teachers in yeshivas, which are traditional Jewish schools. They are typically made with white paper, folded in half vertically to create a symmetrical image. The pattern was drawn on with a pencil and cut out with a knife, and sometimes paper cuts were painted with watercolors or chalk. They were often mounted on backgrounds of contrasting color. In the 1800s, motifs included Jewish symbols and objects such as menorahs, prayer books, and passages written in Hebrew. They also often incorporated Kabbalistic symbols, such as real and imaginary birds and plants, the signs of the 12 tribes of Israel and of the zodiac, and the Yadayin or Hamsa, which is an upside-down hand, or images of lamps in niches. And these symbols would have been understood by the Jewish community. There were also cryptograms, acronyms, wise sayings, magic formulas, and incantations.
A researcher named Gina Frankel wrote a book called The Art of the Jewish Paper Cut, which surveyed many of these works. Frankel researched paper cuts and other folk art and costumes of Eastern European Jews for 50 years and was a curator of the Warsaw Jewish Historical Institute Museum, which was established after World War II. She later worked at the Haifa Museum of Ethnology and Folklore in Israel. She said that Jewish paper cuts, quote, served as ornaments, as religious articles, and frequently took on the attributes of amulets. Her son created a helpful website memorializing her work, and it was very helpful in our research.
So moving on to Western Europe and the U.S. In Poland, paper cutting is called wycinanki. Similar to Jewish paper cutting, it peaked in the 1800s. It could be cut from white or colored paper, originally with sheep shears. Paper cuts were used to decorate mirrors and holy pictures and were part of the holiday of Easter. These were also done by folding paper first to make symmetrical designs, and motifs included circles, squares, stars, trees, flowers, roosters, and other birds. The tradition of paper cutting was also very popular in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, where it is called Scherenschnitte. Scheren means scissors, and Schnitte means cuttings. Scherenschnitte dates to at least the 1500s. Typically, the paper is folded and then cut to make symmetrical designs. The Swiss often made paper cuts of intricate borders around scenes depicting local traditions, while the Germans made more surreal and romantic paper cuts. Immigrants from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland brought Scherenschnitte to the U.S. in the 1700s, and it became a tradition in the Pennsylvania Dutch community. Scherenschnitte in the U.S. was used to decorate birth and marriage certificates and love letters. Popular motifs include birds, hearts, and flowers, as well as imaginary animals and creatures. And paper cuts were often made from old letters and newspapers. And people also cut out scenes from folk tales.
Now we will take a look at two interesting Scherenschnitte artists, one in Germany and one in the U.S. Adele Schopenhauer was born in 1797 in Hamburg, Germany. Her mother was a famous writer and her brother was a famous philosopher. After the death of her father, Schopenhauer moved with her family to Weimar, where her mother became a well-known host of a literary salon. The writer Johann von Goethe visited there, and Schopenhauer became well-known as a paper cutter. Her paper cuts were of people and scenes. She made her paper cuts with black paper and mounted them on a white background. She was known in Weimar for this work. Schopenhauer had a long relationship with Sybil Mertens, which was the subject of a double biography called Love Story by Angela Steidel. And she wrote articles and essays as well as novels before she died from cancer at age 52 in Bonn.
Another paper cutter from a very similar time period was Martha Ann Honeywell. Honeywell was born in 1786 in Westchester, New York. Her family was a farming family who later moved to New York City, where her father ran a fruit store on the Lower East Side. Honeywell was born without arms or hands and had only one foot with 3 toes. She became skilled in several crafts, including embroidery, waxwork, miniature writing, and paper cutting. She made a living as a performer and a craftsperson, and she toured around the country. Her first performance was at age 12 at the American Museum. In her performances, Honeywell did crafts, either by herself or with other artists with disabilities. She made incredibly intricate paper cuts, including a paper cut of the Lord's Prayer, which she gifted to Queen Charlotte of England, and another that she gave to President John Quincy Adams. And she traveled around the country solo from the age of 18. She published over 200 newspaper ads to promote her performances and kept over 100 samples of her artwork. And she passed away in 1856 at the age of 70. And that is a brief tour of paper cutting around the world. Sonia, what do you think?
That was very fun. That was very different, I think, than what we've done before. So I enjoyed that.
I am shocked that we haven't done paper cutting before now because, like I said, I've done so many paper crafts.
Mm-hmm.
The first one that comes to mind is paper mache.
Oh, yeah.
But I've also done origami, which I know you do.
Mm-hmm. And we used to, when we were kids, we would try to make paper sometimes. That was always
yes.
fun.
I definitely...
rip up other paper.
Yes, and one time I had a book about making paper, and it said that you could use the lint from your dryer to make paper. And so I tried to get our mom to let me use the blender to blend up dryer lint into paper. Didn't work.
I don't remember that.
But I've never actually done paper cutting. Have you?
I had a kit because I like origami. So I remember I got a little kirigami kit, which is origami, but you cut the paper as well.
Oh.
And it was specifically like a snowflake kirigami kit. I remember that.
Cool.
But yeah, I didn't think about paper cutting to decorate edges of important documents. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I usually think of it as the paper cutting is the entire object, not
Mm.
decoration around the edge.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for listening.
If you have a comment or a question, you can email us at handmadehistoryhost, hosts@gmail.com, or visit our website at handmadehistorypodcast.com.
Bye.
Bye.
I was just imagining a really old Spaniard being like, I miss the old days when you could get a good Roman olive around here. Now you can only get paper.